An ether consisting of a fluid with kinetic momentum and filling space makes it possible to explain the curve of galaxies without the hypothesis of dark matter and the redshift of Cepheids without dark energy. There is no variation in this dark energy over time either. The redshift and the Hubble tension results only from the time taken by the light to reach us. The appearance of galaxies, the solar system and the rings of the planets irremediably looks as whirlpools. However, for a whirlpool to form, Hamilton's principle requires the presence of condensation. These whirlpools therefore have a cause, the condensation of the ether in matter. This condensation pushes the bodies towards each other. It is the cause of gravitation. Since the ether particles are animated not only by a linear Brownian motion, but also by an angular momentum, the principle of equipartition of energy exactly doubles the energy term in the Lagrange equation, the solution of which is then a tangential speed proportional to the inverse of the square root of the distance to the canter of the well, conforming to Kepler's laws. The ether condenses in the Sun as in all the stars and forms whirlpools around them. The whirlpools cause the planets and satellites to rotate. In water and air, the kinetic energy of whirlpools is exactly equal to the kinetic energy of fluid particles. These flows are irrotational. On the other hand, in the ether, the kinetic energy of the whirlpools is twice that of the ether particles. Compensation is carried out by absorption of the angular kinetic energy of the ether particles until its cancellation when the tangential speed returns to the law in 1/r according to the dotted red curve. There is therefore no need for dark matter. In the same way, close to the Sun where the rotation speed is very high, the law of tangential speeds is no longer exactly the inverse of the square root of the distance. This is the case for the planet Mercury. As in atmospheric cyclones and whirlpools in water, the tangential velocity of the ether near the eye of galaxies may be so high that a calm zone is formed devoid of matter and therefore emitting no light. A black hole. Since the ether condenses in matter, the nuclei of the atoms must gradually grow. The light that reaches us from Cepheids in galaxies located tens of millions of light years away was emitted tens of millions of years earlier. At that time the nuclei were smaller and therefore emitted red-shifted light compared to the emission of the same atoms today on Earth. It is therefore completely useless to suppose that galaxies are moving away from us at increasing speeds with distance and therefore that the universe would be expanding at an accelerated rate. There is no need for dark energy. This ether with kinetic moments necessarily has a limited extent in space. The condensation of ether in matter cannot be the cause of this limitation since, at its confines, the speed of condensation tends towards zero and therefore the ether would vaporize indefinitely. Action is required to limit its extent, just as gravity, the condensation of this fluid, keeps the atmosphere relatively confined around the Earth. This could be done by an electric field or a magnetic field. In the current state of knowledge, fluid mechanics does not provide an answer to the limitation of the extent of the ether. However, the pressure of the ether must decrease as it approaches its confines. As a result, condensation must be slower and atoms grow less quickly in this area located billions of light years away. The redshift of the galaxies located in this zone must therefore be greater than that which would result from distance alone. The confines of this zone are characterized by an emission of light called the cosmic background. But our galaxy having no reason to be at the center of the universe, there is an asymmetry in the measurements of the cosmic background as shown by the picture of the measured shifts. Our galaxy is closer on one side to the periphery of the ether than on the opposite side. We could think that chameleons or other imaginary particles constitute an equivalent of the ether. The mass of these particles in the galaxies would make it possible to find Kepler's laws. This is not the case in reality because although the ether particles certainly have mass, these particles are not subject to any mutual attraction. These particles constitute the fluid whose flows are the cause of gravitation. In the same way, the ether cannot in any way cause a modification of Newton's law. It is the ether which is the cause of gravitation and therefore of Newton's law. An ether consisting of a fluid with kinetic momentum and filling space makes it possible to explain the curve of galaxies and their redshift as a function of the time taken by the light to reach us. There is no need to assume the existence of dark mass or dark energy. At the edges of the universe the pressure of the ether is lower and condensation in matter is slower. The redshift is therefore greater.